Good morning, fourth grade. Today we're going to continue reading about the Great Depression and the life of migrant workers. Before we get started, we have a quick write. It says, have you ever had a job? If you haven't, what kind of job would you like to have and why? And think about if you were to go out today and get a job, what's a job that you could do with the amount of schooling that you have, and what job would you like to do? Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the focus question. It says, how does the author's personal experience build upon the central ideas in the section's introduction? And today we're going to be looking at finding those key or main ideas in the text and using text evidence to support those conclusions. Our vocabulary words for today are pesticides, and that's a substance that you can spray on plants to kill harmful bugs or weeds. And so this is an example of a man spraying pesticides. Another vocabulary word is hazardous, and hazardous is risky or dangerous. The last word is chronic. Typically it describes a problem that you have or a type of pain that you have. And so if something is chronic, it's long-lasting and it's hard to get rid of. So this man has chronic shoulder pain. Go ahead and turn the page, and we're going to begin reading in our text, working in La Fresa. And Fresa, La Fresa means strawberry in Spanish. And for parallel teaching, we're just going to focus on this introduction, this italicized part. The whole part of the book that this chapter came from, it's written by children of migrant workers in the United States. So this is a present day article. Jose Luis Rios is, he's alive today. And when he wrote this, he was in third grade. And he wrote a narrative about his life working with the strawberries in the United States, in California. All right? So as we're reading, we have a couple of questions we want to focus on. And the box 1 says, what risk do migrant workers and their children face? And so as we're reading the first paragraph, we want you to underline the risk that the migrant workers and their children face because of their job. Let's get started. Picking crops is very hard work. The hours are long and the positions uncomfortable and awkward. While some growers treat their workers well, others pay poorly, withhold earned pay, and do not adhere to pesticide and sanitary regulations. By coming in contact with crops that have been sprayed with pesticides, as well as with pesticides that drift from nearby fields and from spraying planes, field workers are exposed to hazardous chemicals and risk developing acute skin and eye problems, chronic headaches, and cancer. Despite these problems, field workers generally keep a positive attitude. So migrant workers want to ensure that they and their families will be hired again. Oh, I skipped a sentence. Let's jump back up. They keep a positive attitude. The pay is better than in Mexico, and obtaining work is uncertain. So migrant workers want to ensure that they and their families will be hired again. All right, if we go back into this paragraph, we're looking at the risk that migrant workers face. Our text says that while some growers may treat their workers well, others pay poorly. All right, and they don't adhere to the pesticide and sanitary regulations. Make sure you have that sentence underlined. And then in the a couple of sentences, the next sentence says, by coming in contact with crops that have been sprayed with pesticides, as well with pesticides that drift from fields and plains. The field workers are exposed to hazardous chemicals and risk developing acute skin and eye problems, chronic headaches, and cancer. Make sure you definitely have that piece underlined. And in box 1, we're going to write those 2 sentences down. The first sentence you can write is that starts with while. While some growers treat their workers well, others pay poorly, withhold earned pay, and do not adhere to pesticide and sanitary regulations. Press pause to write down your answer for the first part of box 1 and play when you're ready for the second quote. And for the second quote, you can start it by, if you have the fill in the blank. If you don't have the fill in the blank, you can start at field workers. I'm going to read the whole sentence, so you can put it in the second part. By coming in contact with crops that have been sprayed with pesticides, as well as with pesticides that drift from nearby fields and from spraying plains, field workers are exposed to hazardous chemicals and risk developing acute skin and eye problems, chronic headaches, and cancer. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the next paragraph. And in box 2, it asks us, why do migrant workers take these risks? And if we go back in paragraph 1, it says, despite these problems, they generally keep a positive attitude, and that's because the pay is better than in Mexico, and getting a job is not a guarantee. The text says it's uncertain. So migrant workers want to ensure that they will be hired again. Underline this sentence because it tells us why they continue to take these risks of getting cancers and other illnesses from working in the fields. It's because the pay is better and they don't want to lose their job. So in box 2, silently write down that sentence. The pay is better than in Mexico, and obtaining work is uncertain. So migrant workers want to ensure that they and their families will be hired again. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to continue reading. It says nearly 20% of all pickers are under 18 years of age. Agriculture is the only industry in the United States that legally employs children under 16. Because families need the money and because parents have no one at home to take care of the children, young children are seen beside their parents picking crops, arranging strawberries in a box, or tying up packages of vegetables. If children are under the legal age, 10 for strawberries and potatoes, and 12 for all other crops, they are not considered to be working, but rather helping out. 9-year-old Jose Luis Rios lives with his large extended family, in a small house in Las Lomas, California. All his relatives work in the fields, including his brothers and sisters. Jose Luis is often taken out of school to work alongside his family. The owner of the land where the Rios family works has been charged by investigators of the Labor Department for violating some 60 provisions of the Federal Migrant and Seasonal Agricultural Work Protection Act, which means that their grower isn't following the law. So their grower is exposing the workers to pesticides and other harmful chemicals. Their grower probably doesn't pay them well or on time. It says there are 60 things that he's not doing that he's supposed to do. All right, let's go to box 3. It says, what role do children of migrant workers play in agriculture? And if we go back in the text, it says nearly 20% of all pickers are under the age of 8. And so we know that children also work alongside their parents. In box 3A, you would write, children of migrant workers work in the fields with their parents? Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for box 3. It says, how has being a child of a migrant worker affected Jose Luis Rios? If we go into the last paragraph, it says that he is often taken out of school to work alongside his family. And if he's taken outside of school to work in the fields, that means he's also at risk for these illnesses that people get when they're exposed to harmful chemicals. And so in box 3B, we would write, Jose Luis Rios is often taken out of school to work in the fields, which means he faces the same risk as his parents. We would also write, he also can't grow up to get a different job because he's not in school. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for box 4. And in box 4, we have a video that we're going to watch, and we want to know, what is the author's message?
We like to think of agriculture as good, clean, outside work, something healthy and wholesome and outdoors, and kids working for their families' farms and helping out when they can. The reality is today, farm work is something completely different.
I started working when I was 11 years old.
Feels like you don't got no choices. You don't feel the same as other kids.
There are hundreds of thousands of children working on U.S. farms. And many kids who are working on large commercial farms. The child labor law in the U.S. is pretty good, except when it comes to agriculture. And then it has a big gaping hole. U.S. law allows children to work in agriculture at far younger ages for unlimited hours outside of school in much more dangerous conditions than any other sector. So a child can work perfectly legally for any farmer at age 12. That child couldn't work serving the food, that he can work 10, 12, 14 hours picking. Farm work is actually the most dangerous occupation that's open to kids in the U.S. in terms of fatalities. Kids are working with dangerous and sharp tools, doing work that may require them to be bent down for hours. I've talked to kids who've worked in 14 states around the U.S., and kids told me about the toll that this work takes on their bodies.
The airplane flew over the field and began spraying on the field, and I didn't know what the spray contained or what it was. The drift was coming towards our field because it was windy, and I'm thinking, oh, it's just water, they're making the crops grow better.
Now, pesticide exposure isn't good for any farm workers, but it's especially bad for children whose bodies are still developing. Farm worker families are typically very, very poor. And kids told me that they worked in order to put food on the table or to fix the family's truck or to pay the phone bill. Kids are working because their families really need the money. When children work so many hours during school and over the summers, it really hurts their education. Kids who migrate leave school early and go back to school late, missing weeks or months of school every year. These kids are from Texas, where school started 3 days ago. Now, some of these kids will enroll in Michigan schools when those start up in a couple of weeks. Others will just wait till they get back down to Texas.
It was hard to catch up in school. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy for me because, sometimes I'll be there in class and my friends know everything I didn't know. And it was hard, and sometimes I feel like embarrassed because I never catch up with them.
Kids are also working because it's legal. U.S. law presents it as a legitimate choice for families to send their kids out to work. And employers are free to hire